Hello everyone and welcome to today's session, Zero Trust in the Cloud, Strengthening Access Across Hybrid Environments. I am Shilpa Sharma and I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. Now about our speaker, Brian Keshwah. Brian is a seasoned information cybersecurity governance manager with over 27 years multifaceted experience in IT and information security across the financial and professional service industries. Brian's leadership experience spans across a rich mix of information technology management, information security, and cybersecurity management, internal audit management, IT project management, digital strategy and transformation, enterprise risk management, and general corporate and IT strategic leadership for large financial organizations. So without any further delay, I would hand over the mic to you, Brian.
Thank you, Shilpa. After that introduction, I guess I don't need to re-emphasize who I am, but I will just do a quick. So my name is Brian Keshwah. This morning or this afternoon, depending on the time zone you're in, we are here to discuss zero trust, and zero trust particularly in the cloud and strengthening that whole zero trust model and access across the environments that we operate within. Normally, we look at on-premise, but now that we are entering a new era of hybrid environments, cloud environments, there's a mixture of on-premise and cloud, and sometimes managing that access across those hybrid environments can be a bit tricky. So bear with me today. We're going to go through a couple of slides. We're going to go through a couple technical items. We're going to go through a couple governance items. As Shilpa indicated, I come to the table with a little over 27 years of experience in information security in IT all across the financial services industry and professional services industry. So I have been working in IT for a very long time. And with that, I've been able to accumulate, different perspectives, different, strategies in terms of how do we manage through this transformation. So context, right? As we continue to embrace cloud computing, as we continue to migrate certain applications to the cloud, as we continue to delve deeper into different cloud models, SaaS, PaaS, and all these different types of environments, the element of access and the element of trust becomes even a more complex topic, right? Zero trust security principles offer a robust framework for strengthening access control and reducing that attack surface, all while mitigating risk associated with modern IT infrastructures. So we're going to go through a couple elements here, but before we get down into the meat of the matter, the three surrounding or governing principles or practices I would want to make sure that everybody use as a takeaway from this presentation would be verify explicitly, least privilege, and assume breach. And when we say verify explicitly, authenticate and authorize every request, identity, location, device health are critical attributes and elements that need to be considered. Access, least privilege, minimal access in order to get a particular task done or to get a job done. sometimes in organizations and in practice, we find people inheriting access from previous roles. This is something that we need to look at very closely through, assurance controls, through regular audits, regular reviews, and make sure those things are addressed. The assumed breach element is one of designing security controls at all different junctures, designing security controls both internal, external, designing different types of security controls, detective, preventative, to ensure that there is no element of comfort within your model or within your environment. So before we get down into the meat of the matter, I just want to go through a small presentation which gives you an element of that foundation.
The reality of a distributed workforce has changed the notion of a corporate security perimeter. We're no longer just securing our office buildings, but everyone's kitchens. Today's organizations need a comprehensive security model to manage today's complexity, and Zero Trust provides just that. Instead of believing everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, with the Zero Trust model, organization assumes breach and verifies each request as though it originated from an untrusted network. Zero Trust strategy is based on 3 principles. Verify explicitly. Use least privileged access. Assume breach. Every access request is fully authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before determining access. Authentication and authorization of identities is based on all available data points, including user identity, data classification, device and application health, and location, be it a home office or beach house in Hawaii. Strong policies are at the core of Zero Trust, enabling you to secure a mobile workforce while enabling productivity. Minimal access to resources and information based on legitimate business purposes should be enforced. Limit user, service, and application access with just-in-time and just enough access, risk-based adaptive policies, and data protection controls. Prepare for the worst to secure the best. Design your system so discrete components are not compromised by an attacker impacting other components within reasonable risk assumptions. Use telemetry, analytics, and intelligence to increase visibility, speed detection, and respond in real time. Each step forward makes a difference in reducing risk and building trust across your entire digital estate. Whether you're assessing your Zero Trust readiness or building plans to improve protection across your identities, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, and networks. And remember, no matter where the request originates or what resource it tries to access, never trust, always verify.
Right. Never trust, always verify. I know growing up in the industry, I remember hearing a saying, trust, but always verify. This statement is actually digging a little deeper into it in terms of the element of verify explicitly, the element of least privilege, and the element of assume breach. Now, implementing Zero Trust, hybrid environments, I spoke about the on-premise element. Now we're looking at integrating and connecting to cloud elements while operating on-premise infrastructures. So you can see the level of complexity building and also the endpoints building. So implementing Zero Trust can get very complicated. It can get it is a multiple point type implementation. So to harness an approach, I've put together these 5 main elements that need to be focused on. The first one is identity and access management, and we will go down into a level of detail into these. The second one is micro segmentation and network security. The third one, endpoint and device security. The fourth, continuous monitoring and threat detection. And the fifth, data protection and encryption. Now, it's a lot. It's a lot to consider in each pillar of this implementation and this zero trust model. But the best results can be achieved if looked at as a holistic value chain and implemented in a robust manner whereby there's continuous improvement, continuous monitoring, and continuous management of it. So looking at it from the identity and access management aspect, we're going to start with multi-factor authentication and the implementation of device authentication, user authentication, and fusing different elements to make sure that that MFA implementation is clear across your environments. In some instances, the benefit would be to have that single identity and access management approach. If it is that the maturity of the infrastructure organization is not there as yet, my advice would be to ensure at least all your touch points have some level of MFA. Access control, another critical element. It comes down into the least privilege element of it, where we want to make sure that access is rule-based and also attribute-based or rule-based. Yeah. Spoke about this a couple of times already, and we will be talking about this a couple of times throughout the presentation, the continuous monitoring element to know when controls are working, when controls are not working, analyzing anomalies and behavioral elements. So looking at it and looking at identity and access management in a magnified way, there are a couple of things that need to happen. There are a couple of things that need to follow throughout that value chain as we spoke. Identity governance. Now, any approach must be followed or must be governed by stringent policies, right? Policies must be aligned with whether you operate within a regulatory environment or not. It must be aligned with either regulatory bodies, or you want to align your policies with industry standards, whether it be NIST, whether it be ISO, whether it be PCI, whether it be HIPAA, GDPR, whatever environment that you operate in, there must be some guiding framework to help you along with regards to what your policies need to be, how stringent your policies need to be, and who really and truly you're accountable to with regards to the regulatory requirement elements, right? User provisioning in the fast world operating environments that we live in, this provisioning must be automated. And also the deprovisioning, so the onboarding and unboarding of the users must be automated as much as possible. And as we mentioned before, the rule-based elements of it. We spoke about the authentication mechanisms. MFA is critical. Single sign-on, there's some pros and cons with the single sign-on. We could kind of get down into that a little later. And also the biometric elements of it. But all these are very strong and solid authentication methods that, operating in a multifaceted or multi-cloud environment, the single sign-on and multi-factor authentication mechanisms are crucial, right? Authorization and access control, right? Granting permissions based on predefined rules, predefined policies is critical. Ensuring that there's no inherent of access moving across either the environment or the organization. Ensuring that least privilege is maintained as users move from one rule to the other, and really adopting that zero trust, trust no one and verify explicitly. right? One of in any large organization, one of the challenges is always the privilege access management aspects of it, where you have administrators with multiple levels of access. That is critical in terms of being able to monitor and manage that access, control and monitor that access, and make sure that there's elements of auditing and monitoring continuously taking place with regards to change management, with regards to attribute management and data management as well. So governance, authentication, access control, privilege access management, or PAM as it's called in the industry, and continuous monitoring are some of the key identity and access management elements to be focused on. Approaches, best practice, and this best practice is aligned with NIST and ISO, although ISO does not have any definitive publications as yet for zero trust. NIST does, so I would advise that you do some research into the zero trust approaches followed by NIST, and those are strengthened authentication mechanisms, which is critical. We discussed that just now. Implement zero trust principles. Never trust, always verify. We've heard that at least 3 times already during the presentation. Secure cloud and hybrid deployments. Now, different cloud models, different cloud vendors have different security features, different security approaches. If you are operating in a multi-cloud environment and you're not using a single cloud security approach, my advice would be to make sure that your policies are clear in terms of what is required of each cloud vendor, and make sure that there is visibility across all your cloud environment, along with your on-premise environments as well. The automation of the onboarding, deboarding, and that whole identity life cycle is critical. And then you will see this continuity auditing and monitoring rearing its head across each of the pillars, because continuous auditing and monitoring is crucial. In older models and previously, you know, we saw audit come in, okay, whether it be once a month, once every quarter, once a year, to do a full-scale audit. And as environments are changing so dynamically now, that annual type audit approach is not enough. And a continuous auditing model needs to be implemented or explored in order to make sure that we are catching changes within the environment, that we are understanding how our environment is dynamically changing. Right? Challenges. With everything, there are challenges. Obviously, managing user identities, balancing security and user experience, because as we implement more security controls, I mean, sometimes the user experience can be affected. Insider threats and privilege access risk, compliance with data privacy regulations, and password-related security risk. So, I mean, I have here definitive approaches, solutions that can be adopted. This is not a one and done. I mean, we can go down into a level of solutions and associated vendors, but this acts as a definitive guide in terms of how do we overcome some of those challenges. Yeah. Number 2, and we had the 5-prong pillars. The second one, micro-segmentation and network security, right? We start here with granular access control, right? Ensuring that access control, user identity, application, and workloads are managed as they move across your environment and move across your network. Second, least privilege enforcement, which is critical, and we will see this least privilege element rearing its head across the entire life cycle. Threat containment, and this is where the real benefit of segmentation and micro-segmentation comes in, where you have that micro-segmentation of applications, of locations, of data types. So if there's any threat or vulnerable elements or threat actors, we can quickly lock down the particular segment so lateral movement is not achieved by the threat actor. To get this threat containment element down quickly, it comes down back into the dynamic policy enforcement and continuous monitoring elements of it. Adapt security rules based on real-time network conditions. So you need to be continuously monitoring your environment to be able to have this real-time network conditions and implement adaptive policy changes, right? Quickly magnified. So define security policies. Now, everything with regards to zero trust starts with policies on the governance aspect of it. Then we move into procedural and enforcement type controls, and then we move into that whole continuous monitoring element. So it is a cycle: policy, control, monitor, policy, control, monitor, right? Segment the network based on workloads and users. So we can have application segmentation, user segmentation, environment segmentation. We could get down way more granular by location, by data type, so that we're understanding. I mean, the main type of segmentation we normally see is application type segmentation, where you have specific applications within a, or each application has its own segment. It's no longer of the days where we have the app segment, the web segment, and a DMZ, and everything web related is within one. So that is something that we need to kind of look at. Use software-defined networking. The dynamic network policies and automate it helps automate segmentation and provides that real-time visibility and control over network traffic. Yeah. Enforce least privilege. So this is something that we're hearing over again, not only at the application layer, not only at the identity and access layer, but also at the network layer as well, right? Multi-factor authentication as well, in terms of even your PAM users, your end users, everybody should have some sort of MFA implemented across their environment. And we come down to the continuous monitoring and threat detection to be able to achieve that adaptive policy type control. Challenges again on the micro-segmentation and network security elements: complex implementation, because this takes a lot of design elements, a lot of planning elements, a lot of integration considerations when you're looking at segmentation, rule setting, and stuff like that. So that is critical for in the planning stages of the implementation, and it could be challenging, it could be complex, but nothing that stringent planning and the use of automated tools which can simplify the whole segmentation approach. Balancing security and performance, right? The optimization of firewall rules, network traffic policies. Long gone are the days where we have hundreds and hundreds of network firewall rules. Simplification of segmentation and simplification of rules is quite possible these days with the different functions and features that we have across these environments. So that is critical to look at. Lack of visibility into network traffic. There are a lot of network detection and response tools and solutions out there, which is, once you're operating in a hybrid environment, it's a must. And then one of the biggest elements, I would think for me and in my experience with this would be the legacy system integration, whereby you have a cloud strategy, you have a hybrid strategy, but you also have challenges with legacy applications that still need to form part of that integration approach, and finding ways to have that implemented securely is sometimes a challenge, right? As the solution states here, gradually apply segmentation while maintaining compatibility with older systems. You know, sometimes security suffers, but I mean, we have to look at this from a risk-based element as well and make sure we have compensating controls implemented across the environment. On number 3, we talk about now endpoint and device security. So while we talk about on-premise, hybrid, cloud, there are now a range of different endpoints across the enterprise, across the ecosystem. So we need to, one, understand where all these endpoints are and secure not only the cloud endpoints, but also all on-premise endpoints as well. Make sure we have detection and response controls in place. EDR solutions can identify these. And vulnerability management. So stringent vulnerability management, vulnerability scanning, patch management, and addressing these at least, I would say, quarterly. This also takes an element of review and work, because you have to make sure that you have your test environments, that you can implement your patches, test it properly before you roll them out. So the endpoint security and device security elements, looking at it magnified, we will want to look deeply into endpoint protection platforms, next generation firewalls, application controls, and whitelisting. I mean, antivirus and anti-malware, you know, there are some schools of thought that this is an outdated approach, but to me, it still adds a lot of value. So I would say you need to use it in conjunction with your next gen firewalls and your application control features and functions. Endpoint detection and response. This is critical depending on the scale and size of your environment, to understand, you know, suspicious behavior. In the banking sector, it's a must. In sectors where, you know, critical systems and critical uptime is a given, this level of endpoint security and endpoint monitoring and response must be implemented. The use of AI-driven analytics. This is something as an organization we have started looking at. And you know, the buzzword these days is AI. So it is critical that we understand how AI can add value to our security approaches and our endpoint protection approaches, in terms of making sure that, you know, we're on top of trending suspicious behavior and monitoring different changes in behavior, not only across our users, but across our network and our environment and our infrastructures as well, right? Providing forensic analysis. This is critical. Whether you don't have the forensic skills in-house, there are companies that you can work with to have on board to provide that element of analysis for you. So depending on your industry as well, this would be a critical element to look at. Mobile device management and unified endpoint. This is a growing concern across many organizations, across many industries, with regards to mobile devices not having the level of security that we expect, or that we focus on our desktops, our laptops and stuff like that, but not realizing our mobile devices or mobile phones particularly carry just as much data and is used in just the same manner as some of those desktops and laptops that we use. So it's critical to have those level of controls across your smartphones, across your tablets. The ability to remote wipe is critical as well. And also having some element of control to ensure that the corporate security policies and encryption policies do translate onto those devices where corporate data is present, right? Zero trust network and access endpoints. Never trust, always verify. You'll hear me say that throughout the presentation over and over. Device posture and assessment, always understanding the status of your device and making sure there's alignment with policies and procedures. And then we talk about microsegmentation again. Encryption is a must. Once we talk about mobile device endpoint protection, disk encryption, file folder encryption, and removable media is something that we all need across all environments, need to focus on. Best practice approaches, strong authentication and access control, and that is going to be the mantra. Regular patching and vulnerability management, and this needs to be closely aligned to what your regulatory requirement requires. In different industries, you may find regulators have different needs with regards to patching and vulnerability management. Looking at ISO and NIST, I mean, everybody would say as often as possible, if your environment dictates monthly patching, I mean, that will be the best. But normally trying to balance security and performance and availability of resources, you know, some environments and some industries push to quarterly, but I would say if you can do it monthly, do it monthly. I wouldn't recommend that anybody push patching and vulnerability management past quarterly, which is every 3 months. Implement endpoint security policies, critical. We spoke about that. BYOD, bring your own device. This needs to be closely managed with elements of governance, policy, procedure, and as we spoke of just now, that whole mobile management. How do we infuse that into a BYOD type structure? And then once again, the continuous monitoring and threat detection. This continuous monitoring and threat detection you're going to see being repeated because it's, I can't emphasize how critical this step is across each element of each pillar. Challenges, right, and solutions. So with the advent of different threat actors, the rise of cybersecurity attacks across all industries, we are seeing phishing attacks on the rise, ransom and malware attacks on the rise, different vulnerabilities are cropping up every minute, compromise of credentials, insider threat, outsider threats, IoT device concerns. All these solutions listed here are geared towards minimizing that footprint, addressing, I mean, solutions and controls are not full fail-safe implementations, but it helps minimize the footprint. And I would strongly advise deep research and review of solutions with regards to endpoint and data security protection. Right? The fourth element, as we've been reiterating throughout the presentation, continuous monitoring and threat detection. So log aggregation. So log aggregation across all your environments, across all your infrastructures is crucial. So you have that one single view of data, analyzing that data and being able to correlate that data to analyze trends in your environment. So if you don't have a log aggregation solution and you're doing this manually, as your environment gets more complex, as your environment grows, it's going to be a challenge, and the element of missing something would probably be creeping in. So I would ask that you invest in a log aggregation solution, make sure it's implemented properly, make sure you're collecting the right data, and make sure you're analyzing the right data. Right? Together with that, utilize artificial intelligence, leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning with regards to detecting anomalies, analyzing trends, analyzing how that same data, all that data we're collecting, how is that painting a picture, both present and futuristic pictures in terms of our environment and how our environment is changing, and what may need to change in our security approaches and security policies, right? Where there's risk, where there's threat, chances are there will be elements of an incident. Incident management, incident response is crucial for providing assurance of uptime across our environment. So we're going to go through an element of the continuous monitoring and threat detection magnified. Looking at it, we spoke about the event correlation and event management at length, centralized logging and analysis. And this includes application logs, firewall logs, cloud environments, you name it. If we can aggregate everything in together, we can then see the 360-degree picture of what is happening within our environment to be able to detect the anomalies and potential attacks through that behavioral analytics. The behavioral analytics cannot happen if we don't have that central logging or central correlation of data, right? Extended detection and response, XDR. So this is also hiving off of that whole element of continuous monitoring, and also digging very deeper into the AI-driven type analytics with regards to that extended detection and response element. User and entity behavior analytics, UEBA, right? This is where now we're looking at user behavior. We're monitoring how our users operate and looking at that behavioral element to draw certain takeaways with regards to security and security approaches. This is critical in cloud environments. It's critical in customer-based type integration environments like internet banking and customer relation management systems. This type of analysis is crucial. Intrusion detection and prevention. So this is your traditional approaches of IDS, IPS, signature-based, your firewall approaches. Security orchestration, automation, and response. Right, so this is also pulling everything together in terms of everything that we spoke about to orchestrate that response, making sure that our extended detection and response elements feed into a holistic automated response approach, and it's not manually based. So as soon as we detect something and it's analyzed to be a definitive threat, there's a security orchestration approach attached to it, and there's integration with your SIEM, your EDRs, and all your threat intelligence platforms. Right? Best practice approaches, security baseline and policies. We always start on the policy elements of it. The AI and machine learning for threat detection is crucial. This will take some time to make sure that you have all the information, that you have your correlated logs, and everything is being, there's correct machine learning taking place. In other words, SOAR, incident response automation as well. This is crucial in terms of integrating your SIEM, your EDRs, and everything response related. Regular threat hunting and security audits. So this can be continuous and this can be point in time, whether it's internal or external. It's crucial to be doing your penetration testing. It's crucial to be doing your vulnerability assessments and your dark web monitoring as well. And then your cloud and hybrid environments, making sure that the same element of control that you have across your multifaceted environments, that their cloud security posture management alignments with what you're doing on premise and what you're doing in the cloud, and that your policies that you are creating are transferable to both on premise and cloud as well, right? Monitoring your cloud and hybrid environments is critical. Challenges and solutions on the continuous monitoring and threat detection. Right? Detect file encryption behavior, block suspicious processes, crucial, particularly for ransomware type concerns, phishing attacks, analyze email metadata and flag potential phishing attempts, right? All critical, right? Insider threats, zero-day exploits. AI provides a lot of value on the zero-day elements of it in terms of anomaly detection as well. Data protection and encryption, right? The first element, obviously, data protection, very straightforward, both at rest and in transit. Sometimes we focus a lot at rest and don't focus much of the data in transit. But I mean, the risk to the data is just as important, both where it's sitting on your database and also when it's traversing across both private and public networks. So we have to make sure that the data elements itself is encrypted. Data loss prevention solutions are critical to understand where our data is going and make sure that there are policies and preventative controls implemented to prevent data types from spreading across different environments and different channels. Compliance. Now, data encryption and data loss prevention is particularly for GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, it's a must. It is a must for compliance. So if you're operating in those industries that are heavily regulated, you already know that the data encryption and the DLP type processes that are needed, and you can't really get away or around them, for want of a better word. Right. Lastly, we kind of look at the data encryption and protection elements magnified. So data classification and access control is critical. We need to classify our data. We need to understand who has access to our data and where our data is. Yeah. Data encryption methods, once again, it can be aligned with regulatory requirements, but we need to understand where our data is at rest, how it's being protected, in transit, how it's being protected, and the whole end-to-end encryption framework that we're using. Key management and cryptographic policies need to be managed closely. DLP needs to be implemented to ensure that we have the controls and policies to block, the controls and policies to understand authorized data transfers, and to add that element of AI-driven anomaly detection. And on the same thing, the cloud, data protection and compliance, we need to make sure either functions, features, compliance, whether we're using security brokers, whether we're using customer managed encryption keys, we need to make sure that there's an element of governance of how those things are managed, either internal or within our cloud partners and environments. So best practice approaches for data encryption and protection. Enforce strong encryption across all data states. And to do that, we have to know where all our data states are, making sure that there's continuous assessment of data movement. Secure key management and access control. Implement rule-based key access policies, restrict usage, and automate key rotation. Those things are critical in a key management environment. Implement data masking and tokenization, right? Critical for PCI, critical for GDPR, depending on the environment. Monitor and prevent data leaks with DLP. Make sure that your policies are very strong with regards to the type of data and what data is being controlled and how data is moving across your environment. And ensure regulatory compliance and audit readiness, right? Conduct regular encryption audits and security assessments. The alignment with standards are critical. The alignment with regulatory requirements are critical. This is basically elements of different algorithms, the type of encryption it is, and the use cases. If you're not familiar with the different algorithms of encryption, I would ask that you review the slide in a level of detail and the different scenarios where the different types of encryption should be used. I mean, we can go way more in depth into this, but this table gives you a good guidance and you can kind of fuel your research. Right. So zero trust challenges and considerations. Right? There are three main considerations. Well, challenges and considerations I would want to touch on. Complexity. Implementing zero trust requires significant changes to existing IT infrastructure and policies, particularly if it's a hybrid environment. I would ask that this is planned properly, and if external consultancy is needed, make sure you have the right consultants on board to help you through this level of complexity. User experience must be considered. Balancing security with usability is crucial to ensure productivity is not hindered, right? And then cost and resource allocation. Resource allocation is always a concern. Cost is always a concern. You may want to look at it in a kind of maturity or iterative process. In terms of deploying zero trust solutions, may require new training, new tools to kind of get down into the elements of a full-scale zero trust solution. Your takeaways. So zero trust is a critical security strategy for hybrid cloud environments, offering enhanced access control, data protection, and risk mitigants. By adopting a zero trust approach, organizations can strengthen their security posture, minimize attack vectors, and ensure safe and seamless access across diverse ecosystems. Implementing zero trust requires a well-planned strategy, leveraging identity management, microsegmentation, continuous monitoring, and data encryption to create a resilient security framework. That should be your main takeaway. It is a journey. It needs to be planned properly. And I would say, if you don't get it right the first time, make sure that your continuous monitoring process takes place and you're continuously monitoring the effectiveness of your controls and make changes as you go. I will hand over to Shipla now so we can probably get into the question and answer segment of the presentation. I am sure you'll have a series of questions. Sorry if I rushed down the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that I cover everything so that we can at least have some questions. Shipla?
Yes, thank you very much, Brian, for delivering such an insightful and informative session. We found the webinar very engaging and hope it was valuable for you as well. Now, before we begin with the Q&A, I would like to inform all the attendees that this session is in sync with EC Council CCSE program. EC Council is launching a first of its kind cloud security program, the Certified Cloud Security Engineer CCSE certification, a hands-on certification course designed and developed by cloud security professionals. The CCSE adopts a detailed and methodological approach to teach fundamental concepts in cloud security. EC Council CCSE program combines vendor-neutral and vendor-specific and cloud security concepts to offer aspiring cloud security professionals an unbiased learning approach. Benefits of CCSE course includes helps learners design and implement business continuity and disaster recovery plans in the cloud, demonstrate best practices for securing cloud infrastructures, uses security orchestration, automation, and response. SOAR for incident response instills knowledge and skill with hands-on lab. If you're interested in learning more, please participate in the poll being conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you. So Brian, shall we start with the Q&A?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Our first question to you is, ZTNA concept is very nice, but what about T cost? Is this will it be a blocking factor?
The blocking factor of the cost? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Right. So cost is always, is always an element of concern. I would say costs always need to be assessed in line with the risk to the organization, the industry you're operating in, and your opportunity cost as well. Because any security implementation, any investment in security, there needs to be some, I don't want to say return on investment necessarily, but you would not buy, and this is something one of my ex-bosses used to always say, you won't buy a sledgehammer to kill an ant. But you want to make sure that whatever associated risk or data that you have and the value of that data, that there's some element of a framework or formula that you used in terms of how much should you invest to protect this information. A lot of what we would have went through started mainly on the policy side, and sometimes making sure that you implement policies may have a minimal cost. Where the cost starts to creep in is the automated tools, the cloud infrastructures, and making sure that you have that visibility. But depending on how complex your environment is, if you're a multinational organization with hundreds of locations and stuff like that, those high-tech XDR tools and stuff could be justified. But you have to make sure that what you're investing in and what you're trying to protect, it's an alignment with value and cost. I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Thank you, Brian, for answering that question. Due to lack of time, we may not take all questions, but I'll try my best to take as much as I can. Okay, so our second question to you is, how can attackers compromise zero trust security technology, and what tools are currently available for such attacks?
All right. Well, with all the controls that we spoke of, one of the things in terms of most attackers start with is obviously elements of public port scanning. Looking at your well, if it's an external attack, looking at your external systems. One of the things that you can do to counteract that is the whole continuous monitoring and threat detection elements of it, making sure that your systems are consistently patched, making sure that there's consistent vulnerability management taking place, so that any vulnerabilities to whether it be legacy systems or current systems, it is addressed. One of the things that attackers are definitely doing, there's a lot of phishing attacks taking place. There's a lot of ransomware attacks taking place, and these ransomware attacks would start by exploiting not only mobile type devices to start with, but also weaknesses in your vulnerability management and patch management elements, looking at SQL injection type opportunities and vulnerabilities and getting into your environment in some form or fashion, whether it be port scanning and then or DDoS attacks, to make sure that they either hamper your system availability or try to infiltrate your web services. So the critical elements would be addressing your web services controls, ensuring that you have a layered defense approach, ensuring that you have that micro-segmentation strategy and design implemented properly so you can deal with that cross-lateral threat movement. So there are various approaches attackers use, but I think the continuous monitoring and following the 5 elements that we spoke of to a T would help you reduce that footprint or fingerprint, for want of a better term.
Thank you for answering that question, Brian. Our next question to you is, what are some of the problems with zero-day attacks that can be addressed by ZTNA?
What are some of the... Could you repeat the question, sorry?
Yeah. What are some of the problems with zero-day attacks that can be addressed by ZTNA? AI.
Right. By AI.
Zen
Okay. That's AI. I mean, the infusion of AI and making sure that we really have that machine learning algorithm working as we should. It's really understanding how the zero-day trends are morphing, and how AI can predict through machine learning, through log aggregation, through XDR, how we can build forecasting and futuristic type models in terms of where this whole attack vector is going to go next. I mean, speaking of that I would say is within like mature environments, because the implementation of, I would say, AI-driven analytics sometimes across different environments, across multi-cloud, is really, I would say, going down into a level of mature implementation. So if it is that you are at that stage, yes, I think it's critical to get done. I think understanding your vectors are critical. Understanding your first forecasted trends is critical. Making sure that your AI models and AI algorithms and machine learning algorithms are working in tandem to address where the forecasted concerns are, and making sure that you have that continuous monitoring element tight with regards to the zero-day exploits.
Thank you for answering that question, Brian. We'll take last 2 questions for the day.
Yep.
Our next question to you is, how do we implement ZTNA for IoT devices?
How do we implement
ZTNA for IoT devices?
Can I take that question away and get back to you guys?
Sure, we will take this offline.
Yeah, let me take that offline and get back to you guys.
No worries. Our next question to you is, can you please explain the difference between encryption and encoding?
Right, so encoding, I would kind of classify that as more on the element of application design security, and the encryption, I would put it at the data element, or the data layer of security. So data encoding and application encoding would more speak to more attribute type designing and attribute type controls, and then data encryption would be really and truly elements of masking and tokenizing and protecting that data through ciphers.
Thank you for answering that question, Brian. We'll take last question for the day. how is micro-segmentation used in a zero trust network model?
Right. So micro-segmentation is used mainly segmenting either by application, by location, by user group, not necessarily. So how networks were segmented in the old structure would have been all database servers would be segmented on one segment, all application servers would be segmented on one segment, all web servers would be segmented on one segment, and you would open the required ports for that particular database service or web service. Micro-segmentation is now saying we need to segment by not only least privilege, but we need to segment by data attribute and data element. So for example, on PCI, there's an element of micro-segmentation taking place with cardholder data only, where only cardholder data is segmented in a CDE, cardholder data environment. And there's further micro-segmentation taking place within there with regards to different types of cardholder data, whether it be credit, whether it be debit. So you then have a hierarchical segmentation approach in terms of there's no lateral infusion of threat vectors from one segment to the next, and you have definitive rules across each micro segmentation of the environment. So in the old networking days, we would have a DMZ with all web services, and once you're coming in there, it kind of gives you a lateral movement approach depending on if one piece of infrastructure is infected. This micro segmentation is really and truly virtual walls that protects either by application, by user group, by testing segment, by different types of applications that are using different types of data. So it can be done in various forms, but it's really granular segmentation and segmenting with a security focus in mind and a data focus in mind.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker for answering those questions and for the great presentation and knowledge shared with our global audience. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you.